Welcome back to theCUBE here at our NYSE studios on the East Coast. I'm John Furrier, host of theCUBE. We also have our Palo Alto studio connecting the West Coast and the East Coast, Silicon Valley, and Wall Street, tech and money. AI factories are changing the game on how people are extracting value out of this new AI wave as AI is infused into all businesses, whether they're clouds, neo-clouds, and enterprises. It's certainly changing the game. Mindy's back here in person, Vice President of Corporate Strategy at Dell Technologies. Great to see you, Mindy. Thanks for coming in.
Always nice to see you. Happy to be here. The energy, I love it all.
I love how you brought your daughters in. We have a little show floor exchange kind of tour, and certainly after. But I want to get into the agent conversation because last time you were here, you shared some data around POCs and POC adoption. And the hottest topic right now is AI infrastructure. But there's also enabling the conversation around what sits on top of it. Because as tokens come out of the factory, a lot of that software layer around the data and the agents are now hitting full stride. You're starting to see enterprises figure out that there's workflows they can create agents for. You're starting to see ROI come in. You're starting to hear conversations shift from cost savings to revenue generating, which means the adoption and the value is being generated. So what's your take on this wave?
Yeah, you are spot on. Every conversation I have continues to be deep in AI. People want to talk about what are my use cases and how am I going to do this and how am I going to make sure that I have the right environment so that I can really drive that productivity and revenue generation. I think last time I mentioned one of the stats out of our survey that said like 84% of organizations are looking to do generative AI on-prem. As we think about that, I think an interesting statistic I don't think I shared last time that ladders onto that is 58% of those same customers said this year they expect to move those generative AI use cases from POC into production. We think about what that looks like by comparison with Agentic. Same sort of story. We're seeing like 68% of organizations already think they're mature in Agentic, which for a technology that, gosh, I think in John Rose's prediction, that was the buzzword for last year. It's gone from buzzword to meaty implementation. That prediction could not have been more correct. Not only that, like 76% of those organizations expect to move their agentic workflows from POC into production this year. The aggregate of that and what it means for businesses across the board, every organization is really focused on the right set of use cases that are going to, just as you said, move from ROI into generating revenue. And recently I had the benefit of being with some financial services institutions, and when we were talking about sort of their journey and what they're focused on, it was all about AI infrastructure. Because if you pair that story, as you eloquently said, if I'm focused on whether it's generative or agentic AI, and I want to do that on-prem, I need to figure out that infrastructure stack. So that's certainly the momentum that we're seeing. In
New York, what's really highlights me coming here from Silicon Valley is that the concentration of customer base for Dell and all the vendors is very high. You got multiple diverse industries, obviously financial services, always an early adopter, but you have other domains that are taking advantage of the supercomputing capabilities of AI factories. And NVIDIA talks about this all the time, and I want to get your thoughts on this because you're starting to see, well, Dell is a unique position. You have a relationship with almost all of these customers. I mean, they've been buying Dell PCs and servers for generations. You have an installed base, but now they're going to run bigger loads that they haven't seen the performance on before. This is where the AI factories comes in. So how are these industries evolving to add on to, I mean, it's not a pivot.
Right.
There's no pivot, there's
That's
no
right.
changing direction. It's a trajectory, angle of trajectory is now going up to the right.
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear you acknowledge the different types of customers. I think a lot of folks are getting confused on, we think about classical segmentation of customers across the AI workloads. Their footprint from an infrastructure perspective looks radically different. You know this, it sort of reminds me of the hyperscaler in early days, that conversation. Today, Dell is supporting the bulk of a lot of those AI workloads that are being driven by those that are standing up training and GPU as a service, those training the model providers. That's a critical foothold because it allows us to understand the infrastructure they need, the scale, which is radically different than what we see today on enterprise, their requirements, their talent, those types of things give us, as you mentioned, sort of early indicators as we move to those that tend to lead with these technology transitions. So now we get into enterprise as we move from training into inferencing. That's really where we see this foothold sort of grow and scale. As you said, we see a lot of it tends to start with research and academia. It goes into financial services, these really large, sophisticated organizations. And what I hear from those customers is two core things around the infrastructure conversation, which, by the way, a third of those survey respondents said, help me with my infrastructure. That's sort of our game. We're definitely there and are here to take that call. When we think about what they need, it comes down to two things. They talk about power, and it's really a broader power conversation around their data center, and they talk about their talent. And I think those become two really interesting areas that we can help them solve.
It's interesting on the strategy side, it's pretty clear from the boardroom, go AI, we need to get in this market. There's been some commentary here on theCUBE during this series where I'll just paraphrase, it's not a fast follower market, meaning if you're not on it, don't wait for others to get a lead because you could be left behind because as they call it, accelerated computing is key. And also that's one trend, accelerated computing with kind of a fast follow market that's kind of not there. The other one is extreme co-design, which NVIDIA and Dell talk a lot about with AI Factory. Talk about that piece, because as you co-design with the enterprises, their infrastructure asks could range from, hey, I want a PowerEdge server, maybe PowerScale and some Spectrum X, you're doing all the blocking and tackling, Dell's a great supplier, but the bigger conversation is, what's my infrastructure for the next generation?
Yeah.
So there's really kind of a co-design vibe with the relationship with customers. That's not common. That was not the ecosystem 10 years ago. We get a great supplier relationship. Here's a good discount if you buy in volume. Here's some good TCO. Check, check, check. It's kind of shifted to, here's performance. Here's a new ROI calculation. Take me through your thoughts on that and how you think about that frame, because that's a system design. That's like building a server. Like, you got to think everything, power and cooling, energy envelope, footprint, energy management.
Yeah, I'll talk about both of those. The first one I think is a really good point. The organizations, we tend to say with these technology transitions, get started, get your feet wet, evolve the talent, focus on the things that customers are gonna be really looking to do. When we think about that in this market, that's not the case. You need to double down and start thinking about your right use cases, the ones that are gonna deliver an ROI. You can't do everything, so you need to be very focused on what you're gonna do right now. That then leads into that infrastructure conversation. And as far as I'm concerned, this requires an ecosystem of partners to really bring the full stack together. It's not easy. When you look at all of the things from the infrastructure up all the way into ML ops and orchestration and governance, this is going to take some time for organizations to really build out the right architecture that works for their business model. It varies by segment. What those training providers are going to do looks different than maybe an MB or a large enterprise organization, but thinking through sort of the right use cases and making sure you're putting that architecture in place, upskilling your talent, putting a governance framework together, those become the real challenges that I see that most organizations need to prioritize.
Now, as agents become the first leg of the ROI journey, and remember, Michael Dell presented at the investor meeting, the physical AI is still around the corner.
Oh yeah.
That's the full kind of convergence of physical digital. But right now it's get the infrastructure, get the performance, things you mentioned. Now the agents come on top. That's going to be the proof ground. What's your thoughts there with customers around how they're thinking about agentic? There's been surveys out there which I throw shade on, which was all these projects are failing. Now if you factor in every experiment in POCs as a failure, I mean, Thomas Edison failed how many times before he discovered electricity?
Yeah.
But there are workloads going into production faster now than a year ago. So there is this whole, what's the low-hanging fruit? What runs on an AI factory? When should I use an AI factory? What's your thinking around that? What's Dell's strategy and position there?
Yeah, our strategy is really born out of what we've learned as a company, and I feel it's right. I've been privileged to be in the forefront of that and really see how our strategy has unfolded. And really what we've done is tied the ROI associated with the use cases into our governance model. So you can do a bunch of...
What does that mean?
So when you think about it, the very first step in our governance framework is this going to deliver a meaningful ROI? And then what you would do is take all of those use cases and prioritize the ones that are going to deliver the most ROI the fastest, or they're going to deliver the most ROI, but they have a multi-year runway. I think a lot of people are sort of peanut butter spreading that all AI use cases are alike. And I'm not suggesting that people shouldn't be focused on using AI tools to help them better search or create content. To me, we're already beyond that conversation. That's table stakes. I'm talking about the use cases that really ingest your core sensitive data. If they're agentic, they take the unique facets of your organization and how you do work, and they marry those things together. Those use cases are the ones you really want to put at the very beginning of your governance framework to make sure if they're not going to deliver an ROI, put them in the queue and wait. Or really challenge the teams to think broader and more creatively about what they could deliver. So I think that those two conversations, interestingly to me, are coming together. How do I govern all of this, and what is my ROI?
I was talking with Kyle from Dell, who just leaves a lot of customers, and in talking to Michael Dell and Jeff Clark at last Dell Tech World, he said, Jeff Clark said, we made some good bets. And one was engineering, the right things with Ehab and the team and John Rose. And then Michael Dell made the bet, I think for Dell Tech World about 4 years ago, he presented the end-to-end architecture, core, cloud core edge or core cloud edge, whatever it was. So those things come into play when you think about the workflows. So when you look at the successful AI projects, they kind of have this end-to-end workflow that's scoped, they understand it, it's part of their business fabric, and usually there's a lot of mundane toil or undifferentiated heavy lifting, a perfect wheelhouse for agents. What's your view on that? Are you seeing that more, that people are picking these use cases, applying some governance, security? Oh, the other bet that Ehab made was, at Dell, was people aren't going to put their proprietary data in the large language models. That's true.
That's what we've already seen, right? That's
that
the main driver of that 84% want to do generative AI on-prem, 100%, and Agentic is an extension of that.
So all good bets.
Yeah.
How is that flowering up in terms of value proposition with AI Factory? Can you share some stats or observations around what's trending in that direction?
I mean, we already have 3,000 customers today, more than, that are using the AI Factory, that are already getting benefit out of those use cases. They're in POC, they're moving into production. When I think about, the most strategic thing on the Dell side is we've always said data is a differentiator. Generative AI loves data. It consumes it, it uses it, it creates it. When you think about what that means in terms of opportunity, these industries we've always supported, think academia, think research, think medical. These happen at the edge. They still have a data center component. They're going to leverage models that have been trained, and we're selling into those environments. But when you think about the hospital of the future, the education environment of the future, when you think about retail, when you think about manufacturing, banking, these have all already pushed things out to the edge. That means they are latency sensitive. They're the most critical sensitive data. Organizations need and want that really focused, simple button with the AI Factory. We think that's an opportunity to bring storage into the conversation. It sort of propagates that power and cooling, and what are all the things that we can deliver to innovate?
Mindy, it's fun to watch Dell over the years because you guys are smart, and Michael's smart. You guys have a great team. I think it was a couple of years ago, Michael's like, the edge is the most exciting thing. This is a couple of years ago. I'm doing a study right now for MWC coming up around something pretty controversial called the hyper-converged edge, meaning that if you get 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, and 6G, and collapse that with Wi-Fi and Ethernet, with like a DGX box or a Dell AI Factory, like this big kind of a box. We saw Jensen, here's an AI Factory you can hold in your hand. That will change the game at the edge. Now you got edge to factory. What's your reaction to that? Because if that happens, you can bring training to the edge and inference and collapse a lot of these kind of like bottlenecks around, am I losing licensed spectrum, unlicensed spectrum, Ethernet backhaul? I mean, this is like the holy grail if this hits. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I know when you say hyper-converged in that facet, you're really leaning into the network. I mean, one of the things that we've seen for a number of reasons is, and that we believe is right, is organizations went into a hyper-converged model because it did a few things for them at a point in time that were valuable. They simplified deployment, configuration, and management. They sort of brought facets together into an easier button. The reality is we're hitting a point with generative AI where just as we decade to decade centralize and decentralize, the benefit of bringing those things into a singular layer where they have to scale one-to-one is sort of breaking. So we're actually seeing a pivot in the traditional frame of hyper-converged into disaggregated architectures again. Within that network is doing exactly what you said. The potential for us to have low latency, which we know is what we need in these edge-based deployments. You think about high-frequency trading. You think about the environments that really have that performance and I/O set of requirements. The network becomes really interesting again, and it's an area to really drive the growth and scale at the edge that's critical.
And it also validates the thesis of small language models that are domain specific. I can walk into a retail store. Okay, John's got facial recognition. That's John. Goes to the AI factory, pulls down my model or my agent. I could program it and say, when I'm go to the store, oh, that coat you want is on rack 4 right now. So like, these are use cases that don't exist today.
Right. You know, but I think we're getting there. I mean, I've spent a lot of time recently deep in robotics. So if anybody wants to geek out on robotics, feel free to join me in that one. That'd be another interesting AI prong of a conversation. But that physical AI conversation is really that. It's the ability to bring all of these things together, the digital, physical, right around me as I need it and want the information. It's all about that data. The network becomes super important that we're doing the right types of things to deliver that latency.
It's funny you brought up robotics. One of our other popular series is the AI Robotics series, and what it looks like is hardware nerds meet software nerds at the low levels, but fully encapsulated AI factories, like a car, as autonomous car, is basically a rolling factory. It's got chips, and so when you get into robotics, the software piece becomes super cool, but that's what Dell does. You guys are like bringing AI software into the factory, aka
into the
hardware.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I love what you said about robotics being the hardware and the software. I actually think the part that's the most amazing about robotics is that it actually has a third leg to that stool, and it's the person, it's the human. It's how do I want to interact with this? What am I trying to accomplish? What problems can you solve for me? You know, I dislike using the idea of Jetsons sort of thinking, but the promise of all of the things that we imagine, that you can really start to see those coming to life.
I did an interview with NVIDIA's lead of healthcare at GTC 2 weeks ago, and she and I were talking about the AI operating room. So this is just healthcare, but now that is a full AI factory enabled use case, but they also talk to other hospitals in the network. So network is also data networks, not just moving packets around. So when you have that kind of physical needs, you need the horsepower. Again, this is why I think life sciences, robotics, healthcare, med tech are going to explode, because they're going to see for the first time the ability to get the kind of compute that they never saw before. So that should spawn more software. Are you seeing that on the radar now, or is that still kind of developing? Because these verticals are ripe. Innovation.
In my view, so it's early, but it's there. I mean, my view is when we talk about robotics, it is a subset of AI. It's one of the AI workloads that we want to help capture and cultivate. It's all the industries you mentioned. I would add to it entertainment. I mean, you know, we love to use and talk about the use case with McLaren. They're creating digital twins of their physical drivers. I mean, these things are happening today. You think about retail, things that they're doing to help you have a better shopping experience that's improving sort of their engagement with the customer. You get a better experience. I've said long, that's a win-win. When your customer's happy or your bottom line is better, that's really where there's goodness.
Well, I'm super excited by the momentum. And again, I really appreciate you sharing here in theCUBE. I guess my last question is, what are you optimizing for these days in your job? You got a great job. You got to look at the portfolio, squint through the strategy, you're playing 3D chess, you're watching the trends. I mean, you got a lot going on. How are you managing that? How are you optimizing your time?
Yeah, I think Jeff helps us to do that. So our COO is very good at directing the things he'd like us to focus on. Our team has the benefit of being deep in the business, and what an interesting time with AI. I mean, all the things that you just talked about, they're going to require a new compute architecture and a lot more compute. They're going to generate a lot more data. That data is really fueled on Dell Technologies storage, so good opportunities for us in that space. And then when we get to think about the growth opportunities, things like robotics, really bringing those to life, that's where my passions lie.
Final question, just to wrap up on topic. Dave Vellante and I are looking at the whole enterprise market. We think this year is going to be very network based. I love that point. But we think it's going to open up pretty big as agents start to get clear economic lines of sight on value proposition with quantifiable metrics. governance, working backwards from the governance, security. What's your view on the enterprise market right now for AI factories, adoption? They don't have $100 billion of CapEx. Not everyone's JP Morgan Chase. Not everyone's got 50 billion like Anthropic just announced yesterday. But they do have budgets. They have to kind of play with the cards they're dealt with. How are they rolling out the factories? What's the forecast look like?
Yeah, on my side, what I see is, these organizations, whether you mentioned JP Morgan, whether they're a really large, deeper pockets organization or they're early in their journey, this is the year that organizations are really taking those generative AI and agentic use cases and moving them into production. We see that from the data that the research we do tells us. We see it from the customer conversations that we're having. And we know this is really the time. This is their opportunity to harness that ROI conversation and get moving on the most critical use cases to deliver business value.
Mindy, thank you so much for coming into the studio in person. I'm glad you're in New York. We can grab you and come in.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anytime, always happy to be here. Love the time with you. Happy to see Dave again, hopefully soon, and really appreciate you having
and let's
me.
Put a pin in the robotics one. Love to come back. That's one of our top
Sounds great.
areas.
Happy to have that conversation.
I'm John Furrier, host of theCUBE with Dave Vellante. This is our AI Factory series where we're unpacking this power source that's going to power the tokens, and it's the infrastructure that's going to bring in the new software models, AI native, and provide a lot of value and extract a lot of value and ROI, all that's happening. We're doing our part to bring you it here on theCUBE. Thanks for watching.